This is what your final Virginia map will look like when you're finished with all three parts. The first part will take you about 30 minutes, and that is to color the bordering states and water and glue it on cardboard. The second part will take you about an hour. That will be to use the clay to make the 5 regions of Virginia. And the third part will take you about 30 minutes. Here you'll add the waterways and cities and use little toothpick flags to label them. As you do this video, you'll want to listen to directions and then pause and do that step. We'll start with coloring the states that border Virginia. Do not glue it down yet. Do the coloring before you glue it on the cardboard. First, let's write our name in the top left corner with a capital letter for your first name, the first letter in your first name, and a capital letter for the first letter in your last name. Now we're going to label the compass rose. We'll start with what are called the cardinal directions, which are the main directions. I use the expression never eat sour watermelon to remind me that they are north, east, south, and west. Now let's label the intermediate directions, the directions that are in between our cardinal directions. We always start with the word north or south and then add the other direction. So in between north and east is northeast. In between south and east is southeast. In between south and west is southwest. And in between north and west is northwest. Now we're going to label each of our 5 bordering states. Use a pencil and write darkly, and then you can write over it with a pen. First, we're going to start with our northernmost state of Maryland, capital M-A-R-Y-L-A-N-D. Next, we'll move to West Virginia, which is northwest of Virginia. West Virginia is 2 separate words, capital W-E-S-T, capital V-I-R-G-I-N-I-A. West of Virginia is the state of Kentucky, and not all of the state of Kentucky shows on your map, just this little section to the east. And Kentucky is spelled capital K-E-N-T-U-C-K-Y, Kentucky. In Southwest Virginia, we have bordering the state of Tennessee, and only a little small section of it shows on our map. Tennessee is spelled capital T-E-N-N-E-S-S-E-E. And finally, we have the bordering state of North Carolina, which is south of Virginia. North Carolina is 2 separate words, capital N-O-R-T-H, space, capital C-A-R-O-L-I-N-A, North Carolina. Now that we have bordered in the states, let's go ahead and label the 2 waters that are next to Virginia. Here is our Chesapeake Bay to the east, separating the mainland of Virginia from the eastern shore. You may want to turn your paper sideways as you write that in the box because you do have to write it like in a sideways direction. Chesapeake is spelled capital C-H-E-S-A-P-E-A-K-E, space, capital B-A-Y, Chesapeake Bay. Then we're going to label the Atlantic Ocean. Just a small part of it shows on the map, but you can see it's a very large ocean. And so we're going to use that little box there to label it, capital A-T-L-A-N-T-I-C, space, capital O-C-E-A-N, Atlantic Ocean. Now that we've labeled everything, we're going to go ahead and color our states. You do not need to use the same colors as me, but you do need to be careful when you color each state and make sure you pay attention on this screen to what it should look like. We're going to start with Maryland, which is kind of the trickiest one to color. So notice you do not want to color this little section here that says that little box there is Washington, D.C. It's not part of Maryland, and it's not part of Virginia. That's the United States capital there. Do not color this state over here called Delaware. We'll color that separately. Also, do not color any of your Chesapeake Bay. That's going to be blue for water later. And be careful that you don't color the eastern shore. That is part of Virginia, not Maryland. Now let's go ahead and color our waterways. So for the Chesapeake Bay, you notice that it forms that border there with Virginia. And then it also comes up here. These are actually the rivers, which we're going to make separately with clay later, but we can color those blue. And then for the Atlantic Ocean, we're going to color all this section up here, all the way north of Delaware, and all the way south down to the bottom of North Carolina. You'll notice there's a little section of the Atlantic Ocean that dips in here. That is the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Now let's color two states that don't actually border Virginia. They don't touch Virginia, but they're very close to us, so we included them in our map. That's the state of Pennsylvania and the state of Delaware. It doesn't matter what color you choose as long as it's a different color than what you colored Maryland. Let's move over to our next bordering state, which is West Virginia. They're in the northwestern part from Virginia. And you'll notice how it kind of overlaps here with Maryland in this little section here and touches Virginia's Valley and Ridge and Appalachian Plateau region. Now we'll move over to the state of Ohio, which again does not touch Virginia, but it does get included in our map since it's close to us. Back to our bordering states, here's the state of Kentucky to our west. Then go ahead and color that section of Tennessee that's showing in the southwest. And then finally color North Carolina. So now that you have colored your 5 bordering states and waterways and the other states nearby, we're going to go ahead and glue this onto our cardboard. You'll want to go ahead and cover your cardboard entirely with your glue stick, cover the whole thing. And then once you've done that, you're going to go ahead and position it so that it lines up on your cardboard, and go ahead and smooth it out from the middle to smooth out all the wrinkles and make sure that it is glued down securely on your cardboard. That cardboard will give us a nice stiff surface for our next step, which is part 2. So in part 2, this is going to take you about an hour. You're going to use your clay to make the 5 regions. This type of clay is called modeling clay. You will want to sit at a table or desk as you use it. You don't want to use this on the carpet because if it gets on the carpet, it's going to stick to the carpet fibers and it's going to be hard to come out. Modeling clay it doesn't harden, so it'll be kind of flexible as you use it. It is a little oily or greasy, so you may want to put something down like wax paper or just a scratch piece of paper down when you're using it on your table to protect the surface, but everything does clean up easily with soap and water. Let's start with our coastal plain region. You're going to choose to use your green clay for this one and go ahead and smash that down. We're going to start with our eastern shore. So you're going to smash the clay down flat and then spread it out so it's thin, filling in the lines. Remember that this is flat land that has a low elevation. So we want to just use tiny pieces of clay, smash it down, and you're basically kind of coloring with clay as you smash it down and then spread it with your thumb to fill in that section. So flat as you possibly can make it and keep filling in. So that's what our eastern shore will look like when I'm finished with it. And then I'm going to continue to do that with the rest of the coastal plain region. So I'm going to keep smashing it down. And I want to make this as flat as possible because this is the region that has the lowest elevation. So I want my clay to be really thin and skinny. So it's easy to tell the difference between this and the other regions to the west that have higher elevation. Now that's what it looks like as I continue to fill this in. And there is my final coastal plain. Don't forget that there is this little skinny part right here that is to the east of the fall line and west of Maryland that is part of the coastal plain. And remember to leave that little square there for Washington, D.C. blank. That's not part of Virginia. It's not part of Maryland. It's the United States capital, and we'll label that with a flag later. Also, we're going to go ahead and use a little bit of our leftover clay to label the map key at the bottom. So we're going to use the same color we did for the coastal plain, the green, and put that down there, and that will tell people that that color means coastal plain. Now let's move on to our Piedmont region, which is rolling hills. So to make this, I chose yellow for mine. We're going to push the clay down to make it stick. but this time we want it to be thicker than the coastal plain region because it does have a higher elevation. As you make your Piedmont region, you're going to want to use your fingerprints to kind of represent rolling hills. So as I did this, I kind of smashed it down. I do want it to be thicker than the coastal plain region, and I also want it to have some rolling hills. So I kind of just pushed down with my finger tips and my fingerprints to make it look like it's got rolling hills. The Piedmont is the largest region, so it'll take you a while to fill all of that in. And then you're going to add clay to the map key using the same color to show that that is the Piedmont region. Now let's move on to your Blue Ridge Mountains. Of course, we're going to use the blue clay for this one, and we're going to stretch and roll the clay into a snake. It's kind of already in that shape, but you want to make it a nice, skinny snake by rolling it back and forth with your hands. We're going to use this strategy later when we do the rivers too. So kind of notice how I'm just rolling with my hands, kind of making a big long worm or snake. And then once I've done that, I can go ahead and lay it down to make my Blue Ridge Mountains. Remember, I want this to be high elevation. These are mountains, and it's a long line of mountains connected together. And so we want to make it nice and high. It should definitely be taller than the Piedmont region beside it. And if you need to make it even taller, you can kind of pinch it to make it taller, but then don't forget to kind of smooth out the top because they are old rounded mountains. Don't forget to add clay to your map key for your Blue Ridge Mountains. Now we're going to move on to the Valley and Ridge region. I use purple for mine, but you should probably use your red for it. So the Valley and Ridge region is our low valleys separated by high ridges. So to do this, I'm first going to go ahead and cover the entire space with flat clay. That flat clay is going to be our low valley. So I'm just going to kind of fill it in kind of like I did for the coastal plain region, but I'm not going to make it quite so flat. As I do that, I'm going to go ahead and spread that through the whole thing. And that would be my valleys. So that's all the lowland. And then I'm going to separately use some more clay to go ahead and make some of those snakes that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to just kind of roll it back and forth in my hands until I've made a couple of those snakes. And then I'm going to add them to the low valleys and just stick them wherever I want to so that I've got some high ridges. So this entire region has highs and lows, highs and lows. We have our low valleys and we have our high ridges that are separated by those valleys. So that's what mine looks like. Again, yours will be red, but that's what it should be as your final product. And don't forget to add your clay to the map key for the Valley and Ridge region. Our last section is our Appalachian Plateau. So you should have one tiny little bit of clay of a different color left. And that one is going to be elevated land. So we do want it to be high. It should be as high as your ridges in the Valley and Ridge and Blue Ridge Mountains. And you're just going to smash that clay down and stretch it out to fill up that space. Don't forget, of course, to put it in your map key. And that means you are now finished with making your geographic regions from clay for part 2. Just a hint, when you're done with your clay, you want to go ahead and use Clorox wipes, work really well for wiping it off the table, and dish soap will work best to clean hands, although regular soap will work, but you just may have to wash them a couple times to get the oil off. Now we're moving to part 3. In this part, you're going to be adding the waterways and the cities, and we're going to be making some flags that we're going to push down into your cardboard for these. So when you make your flags, you're going to want to go ahead and find the pointy side of your stick. So these are actually toothpicks that are cut in half. So you have a pointy part at the bottom. That's the part you're going to push down into the cardboard to make the flag stand up. And then we're going to use the flat side is what we attach the flag to. So you'll take your label and peel it off, put it in the middle of your toothpick. Again, you want to put it on the flat side, not the pointy side, and then just fold it over in half. It doesn't have to be perfect. Mine is not. And to make a little flag. So that way your little flag will show whatever it is, whether it's a river name or city name, and it'll show it on both sides. And again, the little pointy side at the bottom is what we're going to use to push down into the cardboard. So after you've made all 12 of those flags, now we're going to make the rivers. For the rivers, you're going to go ahead and roll really tiny pieces of clay. I only gave you a little bit of blue in this packet, and honestly, you probably should have some left over when you're done. You want to make these as skinny as possible for these rivers into very skinny little snakes. So we're going to go ahead and start with our Potomac River. For our Potomac River, that does form the border between Maryland and Virginia. And so there is a section of the Potomac River we already colored in blue. And then we're going to go ahead and continue to make that border between Virginia and Maryland by kind of wrapping that little tiny piece of blue around. Once we've done that, we'll go ahead and add our flag for Washington, D.C. Mine kind of misprinted, but yours looks much nicer. So go ahead and push it down into that little tiny white rectangle in between Virginia and Maryland for the United States Capitol. Then go ahead and add a flag for Alexandria. Alexandria is in the coastal plain region. It is not quite on the fall line, but it is pretty close to it. That's Alexandria, it's in Virginia, but just south of Washington, D.C. And then finally, anywhere along that Potomac River, it really doesn't matter where you do it, go ahead and put that flag in that will label that piece of blue as the Potomac River. Now let's go ahead and work on making our Rappahannock River. Again, you want to make a very, very skinny piece of clay, as skinny and tiny as you can make it. Go ahead and line it up with that peninsula. And the Rappahannock River does start in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Remember, the Blue Ridge Mountains is a source of many rivers, so have yours start in the Blue Ridge. And then let's go ahead and add our flags. We're going to add a flag for the Rappahannock River anywhere along that river. It doesn't matter where you put it. And then you're going to go ahead and add a flag for Fredericksburg. Fredericksburg is right on the fall line, right in between the coastal plain and Piedmont region on the fall line. Now you're going to go ahead and make your York River. The York River is actually a pretty short river. It does not even go to the fall line. So it's just the second half to the east of the coastal plain region. And it's in between these like two little peninsulas right here. It gets very wide right there as it goes in the Chesapeake Bay. For the York River, you're going to go ahead and add a flag that labels it as the York River anywhere along there. And then in the southern bank, so like just below where you have your river, go ahead and put a flag for the city of Yorktown. We're going to learn later about a famous Revolutionary War battle that ends there in Yorktown. And so it's on the southern part of the York River. Our last river is the longest river in Virginia, so make your clay nice and skinny and long, and go ahead and make the James River. The James River is going to be that last little peninsula here, and that one, as the longest river, actually starts all the way out there in the Valley and Ridge region. So there's our James River. And then we're going to go ahead and add our flags. Go ahead and put a flag that says the James River anywhere along the James River. Go ahead and add the city of Jamestown to the edge there. That is in the coastal plain region, very far to the east, and it's going to be on the northern side of that river. And then finally, you want to go ahead and add a flag for Richmond to the fall line. So Richmond is the very western half is in the Piedmont region. The eastern half is in the coastal plain. We're right there on the fall line in the city of Richmond. And then the last two that we need to add is I saved you a tiny little piece of brown for the Great Dismal Swamp. So go ahead and push that down, make it nice and skinny. And it's just kind of in the bottom there of the coastal plain region. A part of it is actually in North Carolina, so it's okay to let it slide down into the North Carolina border. And then inside of that, take one more tiny piece of blue clay and go ahead and add Lake Drummond. Lake Drummond is a perfectly round lake. And I didn't make it perfectly here on this map. It should actually be only in Virginia. So though the Great Dismal Swamp, the brown part, goes down into North Carolina, the Lake Drummond should only be in Virginia. And then we'll go ahead and add our labels there. I fixed it so it looks a little better. There's my Lake Drummond is the blue, and then the brown represents the entire swamp. And there is my final map of Virginia. We look forward to you bringing it into school and showing us your amazing map. Great job.